So up next, I'm really excited because we have a founder that SFC first invested in this side of 2020. Phil Smith is the co-founder and CEO of 4D Medicine, also known as 4D Biomaterials, which is a medtech company focusing on a proprietary resorbable material for medical applications. Now, I will not try and explain what that means because we've got Phil here and he can do a far better job of that than I can. But what I'm excited about is that SFC followed on its investments since 2020, pretty much every year thereafter. So Phil, before we go any further, first up, thank you so much for joining us on the SFC 500 podcast. Can I throw to you and ask you, what does 4D do? What is it all about? And what's the purpose, the vision, values, and mission of the company, please?
Well, we manufacture a new class of chemicals that degrade when implanted into the body. So you can make a degradable medical implant that does its job and then disappears.
That's fascinating. So if I'm reading that right, and of course I have a little bit of background knowledge because, as I said, we've written more than a few investment committee memos together. You could, and perhaps are, creating something out of nothing to implant into the body, provide itself for a purpose, and then effectively disappear in the body as if it was never there, having had a positive impact on a person or their injury.
Exactly. Yeah. Medical implants are usually, obviously there are some medical implants that you want to be permanent, like a knee replacement or a hip replacement. You don't want those to degrade. You want those to stay there. But there are other things that you put in the body that are there to do a temporary job. And you don't want to have to take them out afterwards. And you don't want them to hang around causing problems, side effects, complications, and so on. So in many cases, it's better to implant something that does a job and then degrades away, disappears, is absorbed by the body, and then excreted through normal metabolic processes. And then the patient recovers and hopefully lives a healthy life thereafter.
Fantastic. Phil, what's the origin story of 4D? Where does it come from and who's been involved all the way through?
So the origin is with the Professor Andrew Dove, who is the one of the leading experts in degradable polymers in the world. Andrew was working at Warwick University about 17 years ago, had the vision of wanting to develop a better material for these applications, because the existing materials that have been around for decades, they do a good enough job in many situations, but they have a number of shortcomings, and those shortcomings limit what you can do with them.
Interesting. So the business is a spin out from the University of Warwick, and I think also from an involvement with the University of Birmingham. And I must declare a conflict of interest because I'm also a graduate from the University of Birmingham. So clearly they've gotten more than one thing right in the last 20 odd years. But I think what's exciting about that, and when I try and think of it in the context of SFC Capital, is it reminds me that, we've gotten to 500 portfolio companies, which is fantastic. But along the way, we have invested in, I think, something like a dozen university spinouts pretty much every year for the last 5 years. So we find that a lot of, the question I get from investors all the time is, where do you find all this deal flow, let alone, doing 100 investments a year or getting to 500 portfolio companies? Where do you find it? Where does it come from? And of course, the universities are a big part of that. Would you speak to that as a huge part of the story of 4D as well?
Yeah, absolutely. We were very fortunate in that I started working with Andrew Dove in December 19, and there was an Innovate UK grant that was on offer, but they had struggled to find match funding up to that point. I got involved, and I think someone at Birmingham introduced us to SFC. I had a conversation with one of your predecessors. I ended up being on holiday in a ski resort and having to pitch to your team from the cafe at the bottom of the ski resort, but it was successful. We got together with friends and family that we'd put together, backing from SFC that enabled us to unlock that Innovate UK grant. So it gave us a really good launch pad just as COVID hit. So actually, had we not got that money at that time, it could have actually been the fatal blow for the company. It's a good technology, so it may well have surfaced in good time. But at that time, that involvement from SFC was critical in keeping that grant alive and enabling us to get started just before COVID hit.
That's fantastic. I think a lot of good business gets done at the bottom of the ski slope. Usually it involves raclette and red wine, as I'm told, but we'll come to that maybe another time. Are there any other key milestones, Phil, that when you think about the last 4 or so years of 4D's journey and you think of SFC's involvement that you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, I think the continuing investment has been very helpful. The invitation to come and speak at some of your Crocodile's Lair events has been very welcome and welcoming. And we've spoken to other people at those events that have invested as well, both directly and through SFC. So I think that support has also validated us in the eyes of other investors. And I think your backing, as also SFC's grown in status, that backing and validation gives us more profile. So I think it's a virtuous circle that continues to roll.
Absolutely. Yeah. And listen, I can say from personal experience as being an observer on your board that we've gained and been involved, quite a lot and learned so much, but hopefully added some value along the way as well. Let's think about that initial investment from SFC back in 2020. How has the tech and the team at 4D Medicine developed since that time?
Well, that was an embryonic stage where we had the founder and myself coming together, the brilliant academic, and the guy that's been there from the business side, and starting with that's all we had. So it's like, how do we build the organization from there? And there was a series of serendipitous moments, really, which you could very rarely plot in advance because it's like networks coming into to help, Imagine starting in April 2020, COVID's hit, the labs at Birmingham University that you're planning to use, you can't use because they're shut. Where do we go? Where do we start? Do we just wait until COVID passes? No, I was talking to an old friend of mine who also has a PhD in polymer chemistry, who was interested in what we were doing. He's based in Nottingham. To cut a long story short, he joined us, was able to find labs that were open in Nottingham. So he was able to set up and run those labs. And that couldn't have happened without SFC's money and the grant that it unlocked. That money, the combination of the SFC investment and the grant, meant that we were able to employ that guy for the first 6 months and start our work in those labs. So that meant that we were able to get started, and it avoided any delay. And as you know, speed is a vital thing for a spin out or a startup. So to be able to hit the ground running, use those monies, and then build from there, get the equipment in those labs, start to transfer the technology out of the university into our own labs, scale it up, start to recruit other people, other chemists, other material scientists, and then build a team. We also recruited a 3D printing expert through another fortuitous network connection, happened to live in the same town as me, of 5,000 people in Derbyshire. Never knew him before, but knew of him. Turns out he's one of the sort of veteran 3D printing gurus of the world. So we pretty quickly built a critical team that was able to then start taking this information out to the world through trade events in Germany and the US, and very quickly validate that this technology was something the world wanted.
Fantastic. Good things happen in Derbyshire, right?
Quite a few good things.
Derbyshire aside, Phil, you've been there, done that, got more than a few t-shirts hanging in the wardrobe. If I'm not wrong, probably alongside cycling shirts as well. What advice would you give to founders who are at the growth stage, so out of the seed stage, at that growth stage, and are looking to attract more investment?
I think starting with the end in mind is one of those Stephen Covey statements that I always come back to. I think if you've got a very clear sense of what your destination is, that always helps, because I think that logically informs most of the answers to most of your other questions. And I think another big part is validation. If you're the only people saying this is a great thing, people are going to be looking at you thinking, quizzical. If you can say, we think this is a great thing, but so does A, B, C, D. And if those people are authoritative players in the industry, people, in our case, we were very fortunate to get an acquisition offer coming in before our third birthday from a leading international materials company. That was fantastic validation that would speak louder, really, than anything I could say, because obviously I'm going to say that because I'm, CEO of the company. So I think having that validation, whether it's in our case through a company that's trying to make an acquisition of you, or through a series of KOLs who are experts in your field, and therefore they can validate what you're saying as being not only correct, but important. Answering that so what question, if you've got people who can help you answer that so what question and say, yeah, this does matter. Yes, it's real. What they're doing is valid and there's a big market for it. If you can answer those questions, then I think you're on the way to attracting investment.
Fantastic. So for our final question or final thought, let's move a little bit from the head towards the heart. And I am going to ask you a so what question. I'm going to ask you this. So what are you most proud of about 4D, where you've come from and where you and the team and the business are going next?
I'm really proud that this technology and this team have, in just over 4 years, already attracted the amount of attention that we have from the world of 3D printing and the world of biomaterials. But more so than that, I'm really proud and excited about the potential that we have to really improve medicine for people that need implants that do a job and disappear. The fact that we can expand the availability of materials to solve problems that up until now weren't possible to solve, whether that be at nanoscale, microscale, or large scale in drug delivery, soft tissue, or orthopedics. There's so much stuff that this material can do. It is the most exciting thing that I've done in my career. And obviously, you can see I'm not at the beginning of that. It's quite a long career. So it does definitely top the list of all the things I've done for excitement, satisfaction. And I hope that in the fullness of time, this technology will fulfill its promise. And that will be resulting in the quality of lives of people around the world.
Yeah, I echo that. I hear, really. We feel exactly the same way at SFC. And Phil, it's been a pleasure to speak with you today, as it always is. I want to thank you and the team for everything you do 24/7, 365 for 4D. And if there's not enough numbers and letters in that sentence, that I don't know what is. And now taking a cue from you, I'm going to do a job and disappear. But thank you so much, Phil.
Thank you to SFC for your support, your continuing encouragement, and your positivity as well.
Thanks, Phil.
Thanks, Jason.